Hello, Professor. I hope everything is well so far. And I'm gonna present my fourth uh, bi-weekly summary, and I hope I can do a good job. So, first of all, I will go through the outline. First, I will talk about the corporate governance and international business based on the complementary file that you shared in class. Then I will go through the effective organizational designs, learning organizations and ethical organization, problem statement, and we can say success statement, and at the end, Capsim round 5 to 8. So first going through corporate governance and international business. So there are many different definitions for corporate governance, but in general, it's an increase in shareholder value and satisfaction of other stakeholders. So here we can see easily that doing everything just for profit of the organization is completely rejected. And in other words, they say it's a balance between economic and social goals of a company. So there are some principles to corporate governance. These four principles are transparency of the organization, accountability, responsibility, and fairness. So for the accountability, the company is not only responsible for the actions that they take, they are also responsible for the outcome of their actions. So the governance systems and corporate social responsibility. CSR basically has two roots. First is from the Anglo-Saxon tribe that they said, okay, whatever you do, you respect others, but at the end of the day, the value is yours and you have to think of your own values. In the Latin model, they say that everything should be bottom up and everyone from down to top should be involved and everyone should share their values and have proportional benefits. Also, they say that CSR is a quasi ownership for stakeholders. So if a company is making a profit at the same time, stakeholders, for example, people who will be affected based on, I don't know, the air pollution of a factory, they also have similar ownership in that product. So they have to be taken into account. And also in CSR, we think about sustainability effect and the way we use resources. So sustainability effect is if today we are using our resources, first, it has an effect on people, especially in the future. So the question is, do you want to think about now or future? And another effect is on the organization itself. Today, they are exploiting the resources, but after a while, when the resources decrease, actually getting value out of those resources is also so expensive for the same company. So corporates should consume the resources in a way that that resource have time to regenerate. Then going to stakeholder theory. First of all, stakeholder theory says that you have to maximize wealth for shareholder, but when you do that, it fails to maximize wealth for the society. So there are two contradictory forces that you cannot only merely think about maximizing wealth for shareholders, because in that case, for sure, you will fail to maximize this wealth for society. So another point is all stakeholders must be considered in decision-making process. If an organization is implementing a stakeholder theory, in each one of their decisions, all the stakeholders are there. So here is where you will definitely see that the wealth could not be maximized. You have to consider environment, you have to consider people, you have to consider government, employees, and there are many theories about stakeholder theory, many different opinions, but one of them that has been more talked about is being a voluntary and involuntary stakeholder. In a way that the voluntary are, for example, major shareholders, mostly employees, direct customers, and on the other hand, we have involuntary, maybe people who are not involved. Maybe it's a government, it's a region, people of a special region. And at the end of the day, there is a big challenge. There are informational needs so that you can measure and evaluate that how organizations are considering and implementing stakeholder theory. So when we go to the financial side, everything is objective and you can easily measure how the firm is doing. But for the non-financial effects, you can see that everything is subjective. And that's why today many companies are allegedly say that we are using stakeholder theory throughout our organization, but in real, no one can measure it. And this is a big issue with stakeholder theory. Also, we have risk management and corporate governance. So in general, investors tend to invest in companies with good governance. So why investing in good governance? Because good governance reduces the risks. So there are three attitudes to risk. First, risk seeking. So people who face risks, they have two options. One is to avoid it, and two is to go through it and look for the opportunities. Risk seeking, always look for opportunities in any type of risk. Risk averse, they always avoid taking risks because they believe that this risk is causing loss, not an opportunity. And risk neutral, there is no reaction to the risk in the environment. So how do firms manage risk? It has three steps. First, risk assessment, through which firms identify the risks. Then, after identification of the risk, they go through the risk analysis. Risk analysis includes statistical quantification, and they measure how the identified risks, how big they are or how small they are. Can we avoid them or not? And finally, managing the risk. And after the identification and proving through the analysis that it should be managed, you develop the appropriate strategy for that risk. So what are risk management strategies? We have 5 main types of risk management strategies. First, risk avoidance. It's obvious, you know this is the risk, you avoid it completely. Then risk reduction. So you see the risk, but you will take some primary steps so that you can reduce it as much as possible. Then you have risk protection. So you take security procedures so that you can protect yourself from those risks. And risk managing, it's all about contingency plans. So in case of any risk happening, you have a contingency plan, and at the end, you have risk transfer. You are most likely to have a high level of risk, and you are sure that you cannot do anything special for it, so you will transfer it to, for example, an insurance company. Also, we have risk typology. We have global risk, environmental risk, like pollution, noise, traffic, social risk. Social risk is roots from any kind of interaction that the company has with its environment, whether internal or external. Cultural risk is mostly happens, because, and it's a high risk because mostly they consider cultural risk as a negative risk that always exists. Financial, long-term, short-term, stakeholder and shareholder interest, and technical risk, which is more prevalent these days. Going through effective organizational designs. First, a definition of what organizational structure is. So organizational structure is a pattern of interactions that links three elements. What are these three elements? Tasks, people, and technologies. So these pattern of interactions that connects these three main elements, they all constitute the organization structure. What are the stimuli that drive different organization structure? There are three main stimuli. First, increasing the size of the company. Second, diversification into new markets. And third, expanding in geographic scope. So talking about the structure models, I will first go through the simple structure, which is like a sole proprietorship, the whole business independent on one person. There is no special job segregation, and the system is extremely centralized. Everyone is connected directly to the manager. When everything becomes a little more complicated, some specialists are needed in functional areas. So again, in this situation, in the functional structure, there is one CEO, still the system is centralized, but there are functional areas like marketing, R&D, production, that specialists are managing them, and all of them report to the manager. Everything becomes more complicated. So we go through a divisional structure. So it's mostly named multi-divisional or M4. And there are relatively autonomous units, and there is excessive demand on top management. Why? Going through this structure, we can see that there is a CEO, but for example, there is a healthcare division, we have education division, and real estate division. They are completely independent from each other. Each of them have their own marketing, their own R&D, their own specific departments and employees. And that's why there is an excessive demand on top management to manage all of them together. So as a sample, we can go through Whole Foods. Whole Foods was mostly working on structure that was completely decentralized, and there were different divisions in different regions and states. So what happened in real, after a while, they got left behind the competitors like Costco, because they were providing organic products with cheaper price. So with the divisional structure, every region had their own division, and they had problems having maybe high quality materials, everything available in enough quantity with especially good price. And they couldn't compete with their competitors. So what they did, again, they centralized all the divisions, and through this strategy, they could manage the price of their organic products, and also they could add more products to their baskets so that they can manage the situation. So divisional structures have two subsections. One is SBUs, strategic business units. They are homogeneous units to achieve synergies, and it mostly happens in unrelated businesses, because if there are related businesses, so you can share resources and you go into the matrix structure. But in SBU, when you have homogeneous units, for achieving synergy, you can use them. Going to the holding companies have a high degree of autonomy, both from other divisions and from corporate headquarters. And the potential for synergy is extremely limited because they are completely different, because they're completely unrelated. And they adopt a strategy of unrelated diversification. So an example is Berkshire Hathaway. So they have Kraft Heinz for sauces. They have NetJets, they produce jets. Duracell, they produce batteries. Or Shaw, they produce laminates and floor stuff. So as you can see, the holding companies here, everyone is different. So they cannot share resources at all. Going through the matrix structure, which is the most modern structure that is being used these days by mostly successful companies, is the matrix structure. As you can see, there is the CEO, there is a sales manager, marketing manager, and manager stands for C-suite in general, but all the resources are shared. So the example is Cisco or Vodafone. How they work based on each project, people from different departments gather together, they do the project, and then they adjourn and they go for other projects. At the same time, one person could be efficiently used for 2 or 3 projects. But there is the big challenge here is that every employee, every resource should report to 2 different people. One is the project manager and one is the line manager or the main manager, their boss. And most of the time this makes some problems, but many companies have handled it successfully. So for global startup, there are some companies that are born global. So they seek to drive significant advantage from the use of resources and the sale of outputs in multiple countries. And everyone who wants to manage these kinds of companies definitely have prior international experience. So the example is Berk and Logitech. Berk is exceptionally successful company in Kenya, Nairobi, and they solved the problem, especially in Africa and Kenya, that because of power surge, mostly the routers went broken. So what they did, they provided a router that it had different capabilities, getting connected to phones, getting connected to wireless or even Ethernet. And at the same time, it could be charged for 8 hours in case of electricity cut. So at the same time, it could control the power surge up to 400 volts. So this product not only succeeded in Kenya, but from the very beginning, they started selling their products to 50 different countries. And their strategy was to provide the material from Asia to be cheap, and at the same time producing it in Texas for the quality. And now it's one of the most successful companies, global startups. And also Logitech, the same process, famous for being a global startup. For boundaryless organizations, the boundaryless design should not replace the traditional form of organizations because they cause problems. The first example is barrier-free organizations. Cloudflare, starting in 2009, the CEO didn't want the normal structure throughout the organizations. He wanted everything to be fast, seamless. So for 4 years, everything was good. Everything was boundaryless. There was no position named manager, and everyone were together. All the reports was with the manager. But after 4 years, suddenly out of 35 employees, 5 employees quit the company, and the CEO understood that something is wrong because employees are not satisfied because they are not reporting, and they cannot report properly, or they want to take a day off. No one is there. There is no HR. They have a lot of managerial problems, and there is no structure in the company. So they understood that boundaryless alone doesn't work for a company, and at least there should be a structure, and then the boundaryless could be complementary to that structure. Going through the modular, there is a good example of Boeing. Boeing in 2003, they decided to introduce a new model named Boeing 787 Dreamliner. And the specification of this plane was like it was cheaper, 20% fewer fuel consumption, and more resistant and newer design. So they could pre-order, get the order of 900 planes, and it was a really masterpiece. So for the first time in the history of Boeing, they decided to go to the modular structure. What they did was they started working with 50 different suppliers in 4 different continents. And what they did before that, they engineered, designed, and then sent it to a supplier, and the supplier produced the product, the parts based on whatever Boeing told them. In this modular form, they just gave the basic structure and assigned the engineering, planning, designing, production, all to the supplier. First of all, the project took 13 years, billions of dollars more than the estimation. And at the end, in 2013, the first 49 planes were recalled because of problem in the lithium ion and fire problem inside the plane. And it was one of the parts that were completely outsourced to a supplier. And they accepted that going modular is not a bad strategy, but for a project with this scale and with this size, is completely wrong. And also Adidas is another good example of being a modular company. Everything is outsourced almost. And the visual companies, they are not used that much these days, but they are fast, they are modular, they get connected to each other from alliances, different places, but at the same time, the responsibilities are not clear and there are some challenges. Going through learning organization and ethical organizations. So the definition, first of all, learning organization lets the employees make mistakes, and no one blames them for making mistakes. But the point is they have to take lessons and not repeat that mistake. And they are always encouraged to make mistakes because they can grow more and more, which will lead to organization growth. And the question of to what extent ethical leadership matters, you can say nothing is more important than ethical leadership. So there is a model for strategic leadership model, the cycle leadership. There are three main elements, and it's said that if a company is not good at even one of them, for sure they will face a problem. So these three elements are setting a direction, designing the organization, nurturing a culture dedicated to excellence and ethical behavior. So setting a direction is a strategy. When you design the organization, you set the structure, and when you nurture a culture, you have the culture. So there are three main elements. We can reward them like strategy drives the organization, structure supports it, supports the strategy, and the culture is a glue that holds everything together. Setting a direction is extremely important. So first of all, a leader's job is to set the direction through a strategy analysis and a strategy formulation. So setting a direction happens in two ways. Actually, two main tools are required for setting a direction. First, holistic understanding of stakeholders. Second, recognizing salient trends and events. So when a leader has a holistic understanding of stakeholders and at the same time she or he can recognize the salient trends, the acquired knowledge must be integrated into the vision. So when this knowledge from these two fields are integrated into the vision of the company, three advantages happen. First, it has a clear future direction. Second, it has a framework for missions and goals. And third, it enhances employee communication and commitment. There are some barriers to change. The personal time constraints, vested interest in the status quo, systemic barriers, behavioral barriers, and political barriers. And change management is completely different structure that should be taken care of in any kind of organization. Cotter's 8 step is one of the change models, the McKinsey 7S model, ProSci model, and there are many other, and also Elisapo's 6 systematic model. They give special structure for how to manage change and with having the internal and external factors. There are key elements of learning organization. 5 key elements. 1, a learning organization motivates people. A learning organization empowers employees. It shares internal knowledge, which is extremely important. Transferring knowledge throughout the organization is actually the critical factor in any organization's success. It gathers external knowledge and it challenges the status quo. For ethical orientation, for having an ethical orientation, there are 4 main factors required. So an organization needs ethical role models. Corporate credos and codes of conduct are required. Ethically based reward and evaluation systems, and 4th, consistently enforced ethical policies and procedures. So there is a theory named Gaia theory. According to James Lovelock, he believes that everything inside the ecosphere is completely interconnected with each other, and you cannot consider anything independent. So when you consider Gaia theory in ethics, you see that whatever you do inside the organization, you have to make sure that what you do is having an effect on other people inside and outside the organization. Also, we have Seng's 5 disciplines of learning organizations. According to Peter Seng, 1/3 of 500 companies will disappear within 15 years, almost 165. And the average lifetime for the largest enterprise is approximately 40 years. And according to Seng, the reason for disappearance of many companies within 15 years and also the average lifetime for 40 years is that these organizations are not learning organizations and they are condemned to disappear. So what are the 5 disciplines? It's companies in a learning organization should have a shared vision, systems thinking, personal mastery, team learning, mental models. So shared vision is everyone owns the vision and has focus and energy for learning. So every department, any decision, every proposal, every presentation that is being made, it must incorporate the company's vision. Otherwise, it's not aligned with the firm's strategy, vision, mission. System thinking, independence among all people and processes working together as a whole system, giving autonomy. Personal mastery, individual commitment to the process of learning. Team learning, individuals share what they have learned so the team becomes more knowledgeable. And at the end, mental models exchange unwanted values for new and applicable values. Going through problem statement. So Bombardier's problem statement, the main problem with Bombardier is the wrong strategic decisions made by the BOD for 3 decades. The problem includes both the Bodin family and the majority of the shareholders insisting on being involved in managerial practices and the government as the main shareholders that causes the outcomes to be delayed and complicated. So the solution to this problem is that the Bodin family as the majority shareholders sell their major shares and leave the BOD in the hands of industry experts for setting strategies and the government to sell its shares to other companies and shareholders. Issues in order of priority. So the 5 major issues in order of priority include high CEO turnover and management credibility, insufficient R&D before taking both train and aircraft projects, taking high manufacturing risks in aircraft projects, operational issues leading to late deliveries and penalties, and the high cost of capital and loss despite high revenue. So to solve the first issue, the issue of CEO turnover, they have to provide at least 5 years for one CEO to implement the strategies with full responsibility. As since 2013, 4 CEOs have been changed by the BOD, including one of the Bodin family's members, causing agency problem. So insufficient R&D. The second most important issue, insufficient R&D should be solved by spending more on research and development of any project, whether train or jet, to prevent surprises like incurring $6 billion for C-series project, which was supposed to finish by $2.5 billion. The third issue, taking high manufacturing risk in aircraft projects. So the third issue is undertaking expensive and complicated projects like commercial jets that started in the 1990s without even sharing the risk with other industry players, leading to the main bankruptcy department for Bombardier. The fourth, operating issues leading to late deliveries. So should be solved by improving their operations through partnering with other major players to meet the deadlines to prevent more loss. And finally, a high cost of capital and loss, although they have high revenue. So with 35 billion revenue in 2018, Bombardier is declaring 230 million pre-tax loss, which could be solved by improving operations and making faster deliveries and making some profit or offsetting the huge loss. The implications of not solving the main problem is the faster bankruptcy, as Bombardier has already sold many of its assets for liquidity issues. Also, not solving the issues imposes more pressure on Canada's economy and industry, as more than 14,000 employees are working in the industry. So Renault-Nissan, I named it success statement. So first success factor is a combined strategy of cost leadership and differentiation. So there is a synergy of 1 and 1 being more than 2 in this case. In auto industry, 80% of production cost is for material and production. So pooling the resources makes economies of scale. And this alliance gave this opportunity for 2 brands to reach the economies of scale. And Renault covers, and also geographically, the strategy was a geographical strategy. So Renault covered Europe and South America, and Nissan covered Asia and North America. And geographically and technologically, they complement each other. The second success factor is the role of corporate and national culture. So according to the CEO, Carlos Ghosn, they had diversity within uniformity. They had commonality with autonomy. Their identity was the basis of the motivation of success. So he firmly believed that keeping the identity of Renault and keeping the identity of Nissan caused this success. Because at the same time, Daimler Chrysler in 1999, simultaneous with Renault-Nissan, they had a merger, which is extremely wrong, because as the former CEO of Renault-Nissan says, no merger and acquisition has been successful in the auto industry. Why? Because you have to keep independence. So putting things in common for the sake of each partner. It's a partnership, and there is no winner, no loser, no first class or second class citizen. Each partner should stay independent. And also they work in order of priorities. So according to the CEO, when he started, there were unlimited problems. So what he did, he prioritized the problems and started with the most important. So that's why he according to his talks, that's why he became successful in solving the problems one by one. And also, he had lucid diagnosis, no emotions, no external factors. The fact, what is the problem and what is the solution? No complacency was allowed. And to overcome the national culture and corporate culture from the very beginning, as an example, there were cross-culture training programs for over 1,500 employees from Renault to learn about the Japanese culture, and 400 Nissan employees studied the French culture. And another vital factor was multicultural skills of the leader. the existence of culture of trust, rewards and tools, and words and meetings, everything was deeply connected with the cultures. So according to the CEO, again, he believed that no one could believe that a culture like Japan, that is extremely collectivist, and a culture like France, that's extremely individual, with their own way of thinking. In France, they think corporate strategy, and in Japan, everything is group work, teamwork. So the only way to reach success is letting both of them keep their identities and at the same time going together and sharing resources. So third element for success factor was the communication. So they had global IT systems. The communication was seamless between the whole organizations. Anywhere in the world, everything was seamless. The CEO was half in France, half in Japan, traveling 15,000 miles annually. The fourth factor was the value chain. So the supply chain management after this alliance was extraordinary. So each partner participates in the value creation. There are mutual engineering efforts. Renault and Nissan cars can share components. Global purchasing, they have global engineering. So the whole value chain, we can say supply chain management was in a way that they took care of everything and they shared all the resources. And finally, trend recognition. In 2010, December 2010, they launched their first electrical vehicle. Now we are in 2020, and many companies have just begun, but the trend recognition was another success factor that they could understand. They started producing electric vehicles. There are two main problems. One is ethics. The scandal of Carlos Ghosn, who they believe that he evaded taxes and some ethical issues. And another thing is that Renault has a large government stake, and this could turn into a big problem in the future. Going through the Capsim rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8. So to review our strategy and structure, we had a combined strategy, niche differentiation, and cost leadership. Our organization was flat and decentralized and mostly matrix based on each project. We could use resources from marketing, production, R&D, and everything was shared all together. And after the project, the next product and the next product. And also, we strongly believed in exploiting the market share. So to see how our tactics align with our strategy, so first, the TQM and HR were implemented professionally and perfectly to be aligned with our differentiation strategy. We spent more than $40 million on TQM to be sustainable, to have just in time, to have green programs, to reduce the labor cost, to have better working environment. And at the same time, we spent $5 million each year on recruiting so that we can have higher calibration of workers so that they have higher efficiency, higher productivity, and also we had trainings, maximum training hours for 80 hours yearly for each worker, which again led to lower employee turnover, and we kept our employee turnover as low as 6.2%. And also, all of these activities resulted in having a lowering material cost by 11.37%, labor cost reduction by about 14%, reducing R&D cycle time, which was extremely important, as 40%, reducing admin costs 60%, and increasing the demand on top of our accessibility budgets for 14%. Again, to check how our strategy was aligned, I will take you through our main 4 segments, the 4 segments that we were active in. So to be aligned with the differentiation strategy, we must have we had to meet the main customer buying criteria. It was ideal positioning, age, MTBF, and the pricing, and which was different for each segment. So in traditional, as it's seen, at the end of each year, customers give scores to each brand. So these scores comes from ideal position, as I told you, 4 buying criteria. On top of that, the revision date, accessibility, how much accessible, awareness, and how unique your product is. So when you gather all of them together, you see that Baker in traditional, from round 1 up to round 8, could stay on top of all the products to keep this differentiation. Otherwise, we couldn't be the #1 player in the industry. Going through the high end, how we could align with our differentiation strategy. So in high end, which was the most important part, as you can see, the green and the purple colors. The green from round 1, for the first 3 rounds, because of our mistake for not having the ideal position for our calculation estimations, we were not good. But after round 4, we were the best. And also for our second product in this segment, from the very beginning, we were completely on top of other brands, again, aligned with our strategy. And the same happened for our performance. So the red and green, the red from the very beginning stayed on top, and the green, as soon as started in round 6, it was not that good, but from round 7, it was the highest, aligned with the other product. Going through the size, again, the red and green, we were from round 3, we were the highest, and from round 7 for our second product, we were the highest. So this is how we aligned this customer survey with our strategy. So how we went through this strategy alignment with our market share, because market share in the long term creates trust. So to have this trust, we made the most effort to keep this position. So except round 5, because of our mistake in mostly because of cannibalization that I will mention in the next slide, we did really good, and we had the highest market share in all segments. And separately, each product in each market had the highest share. Again, for revenue, apart from round 5, and another reason for having lower market share in round 5 and lower revenue in round 5 suddenly is the retirement of the low-end segment that I will mention the problem and mistakes that we made. But again, in revenue, we were the highest. So the mistakes, first, overcapacity. Starting Capsim, we thought that the higher the capacity and the lower the second shift usage could lead to higher profit. So we thought that if we are supposed to produce 1,000 products, having 1,000 capacity causes more profit. In reality, with 500 capacity, we can produce that 1,000 units. So what's the problem? What we did, we always had almost twice the required capacity, and we didn't use it mostly. And the first damage that it made to our company was high depreciation each year, because we are using a lot more than necessary. So we have untapped production line capacity, but we are paying for the depreciation. And another point which was important, through our talks to Capsim, we understood that if you use all of your second shift capacity, you are spreading your fixed cost over 2 shifts rather than 1 shift. So you are already spending for accessibility, which is not cheap. You are already spending for promotion. You are spending a lot for ideal positioning, and you are spending a lot. Your fixed cost is high. So why don't you use your second shift capacity to spread the cost over all of your capacity in that shift? And unfortunately, in round 7, after round 7, we understood the fact, and it was too late. And we made a big loss because we were forced to sell our extra capacity by just 65% of the original value. It was so sad, really. The second mistake was cannibalization. We couldn't believe, all we had in mind was introducing the second product makes a lot of profit from the very first round. And that was a big mistake. And this mistake is completely linked to the third mistake. How they are interrelated. So first, when you introduce a new product to the already existed segment, so what happens? The new product needs some market share. So already the market is full because the commonality is high. The resource, the similarity is high. So in such market, how can you get market share from the competitors that are already active? So Capsim goes in a way that the first priority is your your existing product. So what happened? First of all, you can't get high market share. For example, maximum 10 or 11%. So getting 10 to 11% market share, again, because of high fixed cost, you cannot make much profit. And most of the time, most of our products in first round had loss, or a little as low as maybe 1 million profit compared to 20 million profit for the already existed products. So what happened is the first round, no profit. The second round, you want to increase the market share for profit, but unfortunately, instead of getting market share from the competitors, you get a lot of market share from your existing product. So what happens? We increase the market, the 10% market share to 10 to 20% to having some profit. And on the other hand, our 25 or 26 or 28% market share of our previous product declined dramatically to, for example, 20%. So we have 8% market loss and 8% product in that segment. Nobody bought them. And on the other hand, the new product came up to 20%. So we have 8% of the market inventory on hand. And this happened in round 6 and mostly in round 7, where we went into emergency loan. And in round 7, we had a lot of inventories, because what we did in that round, in high-end traditional and in high-end size and performance segments, we increased the market share for our second product, a new product, to 22%. And at the same time, it damaged the market share from our previous products. And a lot of inventory on hand, unfortunately, and 35 million emergency loan. It was a really good experience. And so how it's related to the low-end retirement with late replacement? So we retired the low end in round 5, but we launched 2 new products in round 5 to make up for the loss. But as I told you, in the first and second round, you cannot make a lot of profit out of your new product. So that's why in round 5, we retired the market leader of the low end in the sake of introducing 2 new products and making up for that profit, for that loss. But it didn't not only happen, but we made more loss because the new products added more loss. So another mistake was ambitious estimation, ignoring the competition, which happened again in round 7 in traditional segment. And it's still, there is still a doubt about it, but because the products in the traditional segment were all similar to each other. So we were so ambitious and wanted to sell a lot more. Unfortunately, more than 1,000 units inventory happened. And the last mistake was late product launch in size and performance segments. So if you wanted to make up for the loss, or it's better to say for the potential, for the untapped potential profit of the low end, we should have launched our new products 2 rounds earlier. So we should have launched 2 or 3 new products in round 4 or in round 3, so that we could have profit in round 5 and then retiring the low end. Thank you, Professor, for all the efforts and everything that you gave us during this time. And I hope this presentation was well by you. But another thing that I wanted to share with you was actually going through the Capsim. There is a balanced scorecard. When you go to the dashboard, using reports, debrief reports, there is a balanced scorecard top 10. So here there is a decile based on the decile between 1,366 eligible teams globally. University of Canada West is part of many. So fortunately, in round 6 and 7, we have the pride to be part of the top decile between actually 1,865 teams in round 6. As you can see here, University Canada West, here, Darren Hancock, we are C123812, 8 days ago, the Baldwin team. We are in the top decile, and as you can see, the previous Baldwin 89 days ago, in your last term, they were here. And also in round 7, again, as you can see, University Canada West, Darren Hancock, Baldwin, University at the industry ID 5 days ago, we were in top decile. Unfortunately, we couldn't be in the recap round 8 or other rounds, and I think we can, if we were to do the same simulation, hopefully I can say that we can be in the top decile, especially in the recap. I hope that this presentation finds you well, and have a good day.